Kyra, hi, how you doing? All right, thank you so much for submitting your work. So, you're looking really good here. It's a really good start. Excellent start. Craft is outstanding. There's a few areas I'm a little bit concerned about, and I'll describe why so that you can prepare this for your final submission, right? Okay, so what I've got here, I've got this file up right here, and this file is from the actual I'm trying to get this in the window here. I think that works. Yeah. Okay. So you can see that, right? Okay, cool. So this file is from the instructional tutorial in the weekly announcements. Gosh, let me just show you where. Let's go right here. I just want to show you where this is. You've already looked at the announcement, I can see. So I believe you've already seen this. Here's a welcome. Oh, it's a welcome to week 2. And if you go down to the bottom of welcome to week 2, right here. Oh, everybody has read the announcement, so I get that. So I know you've looked at it, but I just want to make sure that you know where this file came from. This video right here, how to kern the phrase fire and ice. So, and again, that's over in the welcome to week 2 announcement. So, anyways, that's where this file came from, by the way. And I would consider this to be optimally kerned based on the typeface, its visual attributes, as well as the point size. And I say this point size because it should be noted that kerning quite often depends on how big you want the type to be. So for example, in display type, anything above 14 point or so, you're going to want to really pay attention to your spacing and kerning. So this at this size, this would be indicative of either display type or some sort of a headline type. So the point is that we would want to really optimally kern this as well as possible, which I've done here. To me, I think after 20 some years of experience with typography, to me, I would consider this to be kerned optimally, right? Now, I'm going to jump over to yours so we can compare them and take a look. And we see a couple of areas that can be improved. The first thing I see is I think a lot of your letter forms are just a little bit too thick in areas. So we see this area of this, see the axis of that lowercase d. See how it's on a diagonal? And you can also say that this area right here, we've got this variable width stroke, but we don't really have that represented here in yours. So you want to definitely take a look at those variable. You've got it in some areas, but like take a look at that N right there, the top of the N where it meets that vertical stem. See how thin it is? It really tapers off going in there. So you want to represent that in all your letter forms as we move forward. Now, as far as your spacing and your kerning goes, when I say spacing, I'm talking about word spacing, and kerning, of course, is the space between letters. But typically, and quite often, I will always recommend that you start your kerning and your spacing in the most difficult areas of a phrase or a word. And the difficult areas in this particular phrase are twofold. Number one, it's the space between the fire, the F and the I in fire. And the reason I say that is because of that tittle. That's going to introduce a few new considerations here. We don't want the tittle to touch the serif of the F, okay? That's something we don't want. We can get it close, and I recommend we do so. If you could by the way, screenshot this and use it for reference for your final submission. But we can see that can get in there. We can close that down a little bit. Subsequently, when we close that down a little bit, you're going to want to close down the space between the I and the R and the E. I think fire is overall too widely spaced, as we can clearly see in comparison. Then and, big space between the A and N, I would close that down a little bit. And then the D can be just a little touch closer to the end. That N seems to be on a diagonal, so that's kind of throwing things a little bit. So make sure that's perfectly straight on your final submission. Ice looks great, except the space right here is just a little bit too large. Okay, now as far as word spacing, this is a problem area right here, but the space between the F and the the space between the E and fire and the A and and. And the reason I say that, and if you look through the course materials, this will be a review, but we typically want to find areas, as I said before, areas of concern and deal with them first, then continue on to your spacing. This is an area of concern, and as defined in our course lectures, the reason this is an area of concern is because quite often when we have a word space between letters that have open counters, that introduces a kind of a new snafu to things, because basically these two open counters here in the lowercase a and the lowercase e kind of create this illusion. This space is much, much, much larger than it actually is. And we really have to accommodate for that in open counters by reducing that space, as I've done here. Now, the interesting thing here is that the space between the D and the I right here, and I'm just looking at the space between the serifs, that space right there is actually much, much greater than the space between this E and this A. And I know I mean, you know what? Go ahead and measure it. I have a lot of students going, I didn't believe you at first, so I measured it, and sure enough. And if you do, you'll measure it, you'll see it's an illusion. This appears to be wider, larger than it is based on those open counters. Okay, and that's why we bring that a little closer right there. Okay, so that's what we're after in our final submission. Just watch your kerning, watch your word spacing. The other thing I want to show you is overshoot. And overshoot is, we can see overshoot. I'm just going to open up the preview, and I want to go to week 2 lecture because I want to show you where to find overshoot. Week 2 presentation, anatomy of type part 2. If we pop that guy open right there and we come down, there's a slideshow. About halfway down the page, here it is right here. It's called optical relationships. And if this is a slideshow, so be sure to slide through this. And these are the descriptions of each slide. So we can see in the first 2 slides, the A and the V indicate overshoot. And then the second slide, the round letter forms indicate overshoot. And as I said, you can read about those here, but I'll be looking for those in your final fire and ice. Now, the reason that I didn't mention or look at overshoot in week 1 is because we hadn't introduced overshoot yet. It wasn't introduced to our week 2 lecture. So of course I can't hold you accountable for something that you hadn't learned yet, right? Makes sense. So we will be looking for overshoot in your final submission. Okay, Kyra, that's what I have. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. But I'd like to see those issues resolved in your final submission. And again, of course, any questions at all, please let me know. All right, fantastic start. Thank you very much.